Hello and welcome to the 12 Months to Marathon podcast with me, John Hill, the running podcast for the over 35s with Marathon Dreams. Episode 45, the hot and the cold of marathons. Now, after some fantastic interviews over the last couple of weeks, it's just me on my lonesome today. And I realise that I haven't had the opportunity yet to do a review of the two large marathons here in the UK, London and Manchester, and also to talk about marathon blues. So the hot is going to be talking about the heat of those particular marathons, especially, and any other hot marathon that you've done. And then also I want to talk about marathon blues because it is a thing, and I wanted to do this episode specifically for those of you who have come off those marathons and are perhaps now in a bit of a void, which does happen, and I've experienced it myself. So what's going on with me at the moment? Right, so I've got into Hyrox, which was great. I did the Birmingham Half Marathon at the start of May, and I got my second fastest half marathon time, which I was really pleased with. I finished 10th in my age category, which is 45 to 49 if you're interested. So again, I was really, really pleased with that. It was quite a strong field based on that, because my time was relatively quick. 1:25:53, as my memory serves me. So I was really pleased with that, considering I was ill after my marathon. And it's good. It's a good course, great day, great organisation. If you ever get a chance to do any of the great runs, I would recommend them. And if you, of course, want to come up to sunny Birmingham here in the UK, you're more than welcome to come up and experience our wonderful city, and I would recommend it. So that's me at the moment. So we're starting to build base now for Hyrox training, which will start in July. I'll probably slot another race in June, July. We'll see how we go. But that's me at the moment. So the first thing I want to talk about is London and Manchester marathons, particularly in this country. And I want to talk about the heat, because we had a fantastic turnout for our guys that work with me here in the marathon. And they all got round as best as they could. We had a couple get tripped over, one fall over, and we had a few that were levelled by the heat and perhaps didn't achieve what they wanted to. And I've spoke to so many of you on Instagram, 12 Months to Marathon, after the marathon, messaging me saying, how disappointed you were about the heat and how it impacted you and affected you, which is totally normal, because my first two out of my first three marathons back in 2014 and 2015 were really hot. London and Paris particularly were really hot. London was the worst one in 2014 just because of the fact that it was hot and it was clear, like it was for the guys that did London this year, and also the fact London's hot anyway because of the buildings and the people and everything else. And this year, unfortunately, Manchester was hot, which is rare, because I've done Manchester 4 times and it's never got that hot before. And in fact, a couple of times when I've done Manchester, even in April, it's been shivering cold. So at the start, at least. So I want to just quickly put that to bed and say, if you did everything you possibly could in marathon training, those are the controllables. And marathon training, or training for any race, is about controlling the controllables, okay? And if you got caught out by the heat on the day, there isn't a great deal you can do about that pre-run, okay? What do I mean by that? Well, basically, you can't overhydrate for a race in advance because you're not a camel, okay? So your hydration strategy, if you have a hydration strategy, you should have a hydration strategy, should be the same, because there's nothing you can do pre-race. Potentially increase your electrolyte consumption, but even still, there's only so much you can do there. So there's not a great deal you can do to prepare for the heat from a physical standpoint, apart from follow your plan taper and make sure that you follow a normal hydration protocol for the marathon. And all you can do on the day, like I told some of the guys, was drink more water. Obviously, make sure you've always got water with you. I believe they were giving out ice packs to put under hats and put on heads, and throwing water over your heads, and there was hoses and there was showers and all sorts. And it was interesting, actually, because when I did the Birmingham Half, even though it wasn't hot really, it started off at about 8 degrees and it was only a week later, there was showers, like the little shower gazebo type things that you run through. So first thing to say is, if you did your best and it was only the heat that impacted you, then that's all you can do. There's not much else you can do about that. And if there was things that you didn't do in training that impacted your overall performance, then that's the stuff you can go away and learn from. Because marathon running, I think once you've done one, you've got a good experience to know what comes next. And I said, because there was somebody particularly in my coaching group, Henry, who did a PB of shave 5 minutes off his time. And the reason why he did that, one of the reasons why he did that, was because he's not just running the heat before, he's run a marathon before, yeah? So he understood one of the variables. So if you haven't run a marathon before and you're dealing with the heat, you're dealing with two unknowns. So it's a lot. So you've got to give yourself a bit of a break for that. So if you are feeling a little bit down because of your experience, because of the heat, it's not your fault. Forgive yourself and you get the chance to go again if you want to. And then perhaps what I do, if I'm honest, is I try and be a little bit more strategic about the times in which I book races. I'm like, right, I know that if I do a race at the start of March, for example, or in the autumn, there's always a chance that it's going to be a bit colder. But there's nothing we could have done. It was a freakish day. It was the fourth hottest ever in terms of London Marathon at least. So give yourself a bit of a break and forgive yourself. Which brings me nicely on to the next point around marathon blues. Now, one of the biggest mistakes I ever made, looking back, which I've learnt from, was when I did my 5 marathons in a year in 2015, I then didn't do another one until 2017, and it was mid-2017 as well. So that was a mistake because I missed it for one. I missed the discipline of having at least one marathon a year and following a training plan. So there was a little bit of a void there. And it's very hard when you've put all this effort into one thing, 16 weeks. It's very all-encompassing. It's very expensive from a time and a financial point of view, let's be honest. And also, psychologically, you put a lot into it mentally. When that's taken away, it can be a big deal and it can leave a bit of a gap. And to be fair, a lot of people have messaged me on Instagram and said, oh, I've entered another one, or I'm going again, or I'm doing this one because they want to redeem themselves. But it's managing those marathon blues a little bit that is difficult for a lot of people, because for some people it's a very, very challenging endeavour. Now, you might listen to that and think, well, it's challenging for everyone. Yes, it is, but for some people it's extra specially challenging. Now, let's use the example of the London Marathon, right? If you were in the 11:20, I think it was, wave, number one, you're going to be running at the hottest part of the day. You're going to be hitting probably half marathon distance at the hottest part of the day, right? That's the first thing. Secondly, because you're in a slower quote unquote wave, naturally there's going to be more people walking. There's going to be, potentially more traffic in terms of people, and getting around people is going to be a challenge, and there's going to be more rubbish on the street. So you're automatically stacking up the challenges. So for some people, it was incredibly challenging. And in those circumstances, it's very hard to necessarily hit a time that you want. So if you're disappointed as it is, and then you've got this void because you've been training so hard for something, it's difficult to deal with, and it is a real thing. My advice, as you might have seen me on Instagram say to a few people, is get yourself booked in for some kind of race as soon as possible. Because what you might find is, if you've done a half marathon before or a 10k before, it's a lot more straightforward to personal best those distances because you've just run a marathon. I gave you my example at the half. Now, whilst quote unquote I'm a different beast in potentially where I'm at, but the truth is I didn't train for that half marathon. I came straight off a full marathon, was ill, knocked out for 2 weeks, got back to some sort of running, did my usual, which is probably 30 miles a week, if that, and then a bit of strength training. But because I'm conditioned, I was able to go and deliver that performance. And I would recommend, to build your confidence and to make you feel better, try and enter a race as quick as you possibly can. Now, again, back to my previous point, we are entering sort of May and June and July, so potentially it's going to get a little bit warmer, which could hamper you. But certainly it will potentially build your confidence back, because you know that you've done a marathon and you can deliver those distances at a quicker rate, if that makes sense. So there's no easy way really to deal with marathon blues. It's one of those things that we all have to deal with. I think it just shows, I suppose, the importance for a lot of us of the training program, because we throw so much into it and put so much into it that it does leave a bit of a gap, because you don't know what to do with yourself, because literally, especially if you're following a proper plan, you're running 4 to 6 times a week. So to take that away from you is a big deal. So I think it's okay to feel a bit down, but look at the next thing, look at the next goal. Yeah, be that person that can say, well, okay, what's next? And that's all I've ever done, really. And the people that I work with, one of the big chats I had with them after the marathon had finished, particularly the guys who had finished their time working with us because they had that specific goal, was, well, what's next? And they've all sort of said, well, I'm looking at this, I'm looking at that, I'm looking at this, I'm looking at that, because it's good to have those goals. I think marathon runners by nature, most marathon runners are goal-driven people. You get the first-timers and you get the people who actually never ever do it again. There's plenty of those, and that's cool if that's your choice. But if you're the type of person that wants to do more and do better, then get yourself booked in for something as quick as possible, and it'll help alleviate those marathon blues. Yeah, because the psychological impact of running a marathon, the whole thing, the training plan, the actual race itself, and then the gap that's left can be quite overwhelming for a lot of people, and you have to give yourself the time to adjust to that, really. It is a difficult thing to do, and you've got to be very conscious of your mental state as well as your physical state. You need time to recover. Of course, for a lot of you, we've got past that now because you would have recovered as I record this, but you've got to recover physically and you've got to recover mentally, and part of the mental recovery process is dealing with the marathon blues and also forgiving yourself for your performance on the day, because you can go again. Okay, so if you are feeling marathon blues and you're also disappointed because you have run a marathon in the heat or there's been conditions that have not been favourable, it's always a chance to go again. It's always a chance to say, right, what's possible for me and what can I achieve? And I would highly recommend that you do that. So that's kind of it, really. There's nothing more complicated than that. It can be a difficult time. Obviously it's easy then to slot back into your life and then perhaps take your finger off the pulse a little bit and you take your eye off the ball and maybe slip into bad habits like I did back in 2016, put a bit of weight on, wasn't running as much, and it's easy to fall into those habits. But don't do that. Give yourself something to aim for. Give yourself a chance at redemption if you are disappointed. That's fine. You can always go again. You can always do something else. And it's fine to feel a little bit down. It's fine to feel maybe even a little bit empty because you've had this big thing consuming your life that's been taken away. But do give yourself a bit of a break and then plan for the rest of this year to see what's next. And hey, if you are in a position where you think, well, I might want to go again in the autumn, October marathons, usually training starts around June. So, June, July time. So you've got even a little bit of time to get yourself settled down and rested before you go again this year, which is possible. And if you want to do that, then absolutely don't limit yourself. Go and fulfill your potential. If you feel like you're ready to go again this year, go again this year. If not, that's cool. Look at the spring next year. I'm having a lot of conversation with people now who are looking ahead to spring 26 for their next marathon. So give yourself a bit of a break. It's fine. Please forgive yourself. Make sure that the mental side is taken care of because it is a big deal, as well as the physical. And if you need any support at all, as always, don't forget, drop me a follow on Instagram at 12 Months to Marathon. I'd appreciate that. With this podcast, the best thing you can do for me here is give me the 4-star rating on Spotify and then share it with your friends. That's really, really appreciated. Subscribe if you need to, wherever you get your podcast from. Apple as well, same thing. Make sure to drop a review on there and share it as well with your friends. I really, really appreciate your support. Thank you so much for all the nice messages that I've had. I've had some lovely messages from people who have said how much we've helped them. People I didn't even know, if I'm honest, have messaged me after the marathons who just follow me and have followed the stuff that I do. So I'm glad that I'm adding value to you, and I appreciate that. We've got some fantastic guests coming up as well on the podcast, hopefully over the next couple of weeks. So you want to stay tuned for that. So don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and follow the podcast to make sure that you get those episodes. And again, I really, really appreciate all the support. Thanks for all the comments. Thanks for all the well wishes. And you did your best. I know you did. And if you need any help at all, I'm always here, whether that's just following me, supporting the podcast, or if you want to have a chat about some structured coaching, I'm always here to have a chat with you at 12 Months to Marathon. So thank you again for listening. I really, really appreciate it. Well done to all of you. And I'll speak to you all again very soon indeed.